Now, after understanding what are the different types of data and what is data all about, let's try to understand another thing. That is nothing but database. Now, what is a database? And why do you think so database is important? And why the database as a concept came into consideration? So, let's try to see what is a database, why the use of database is important, and what kind of uses we can see, and what are the benefits of storing the data in the form of database. So, if I want to talk upon something called as database, now let's see what's a database. If I go over here and I say that I'm going to understand something related to database. Now, first of all, what is a database? Now, database is nothing but a container which will help us to collect and store the data. So, a container, I can say, which helps in storing of data. Now, why this container is required and what is the meaning of that? Now, as you know that you all must be having photos saved into your phone, into your laptops and many things. Now, it's not disorderly stored. There is one folder being created and into that you can see all the photos and images which are there. Now, in your phone you can go into gallery and you can find different folders where your photos are being stored. Similarly, you can go to your phone book and then you can search for n number of contacts which are there. So here that phone book or your gallery is acting as a container which is helping you to store your data. Now there is some related data stored in related folders which are there. So that's an example of a database. Now when I talk upon database, databases are nothing but also known as collection of related data. Related data, which means I'm taking the data and I'm collectively storing it at one place. So when I want to access it, when I want to search for it, or when I want to find certain elements from my data, I can easily go to that particular location and then I can fetch it, or I can extract it, or I can use it for my analysis. So that's what a database is all about. So when I want to explore more about the data, I can definitely go into something called as database where my data is collectively stored. But why do you think so that the data was stored in the form of databases? We had Excel files, we have spreadsheets, we had documents, but why a database as a concept came into market? Let's try to understand that. So let's try to understand that why database as a concept was coming into consideration. So let's understand a question known as why. So why database came into picture? So now initially, as you know, that we were storing data at the very first go in the form of physical format, physical papers. Now initially when the data were stored, when the data were captured, they were physically stored, that is into books, registers and so on. And when the data was physically stored, there were challenges being faced. Now what were the challenges? First is the data is not properly organized. The second is the data needs a lot of efforts to be stored. Third is that is if you want to do calculations and all, it was not so feasible enough to do a quick calculations, quick mathematics and report generation. The reporting of the data was very difficult. If you want to access certain data, that was also difficult. So in order to keep those difficulties in mind and those challenges in mind, what did we invent? We invented something called as spreadsheet. As you all know that what's a spreadsheet? Now spreadsheet is nothing but a 2D grid of data. Now what is the meaning of 2D grid of data? A 2D grids of data is a data nature where the data is stored in the form of rows and columns. So that's a 2D grid of data which was there. So when spreadsheet as a concept was invented, there were also many challenges being faced. Now, first challenge which was being faced in spreadsheet is storing huge amount of data. So that was the first challenge being faced, that huge amount of data storage was a problem in a spreadsheet. Why? Because spreadsheet were showing some limitations that it will allow you to store limited set of records. So that's the first challenge being faced. The next challenge is when you're talking about retrieval. That is retrieval of data, access of data. So retrieval, filtering and reporting of data. It was there, but it needs to be enhanced further because huge set of data were there, not all of them were taken into consideration. So retrieval of the data was comparatively slow when huge amount of data was there, and reporting was not complete enough if the complete data was not being stored. So reporting, retrieval and fetching of the data was somewhat challenging at certain points of time. Now there was also a thing that is security. Now when I talk upon something called as security is allowing that data secureness. That is, if I am sharing the data, not complete data should go. There should be limited set of information should be going, or not all the changes should be possibly allowed into the data which is being given. Now there was a chance of data breach and so on, or the data could be manipulated by the other person. There were some restrictions which we need to apply on the data which is being stored, but were not so possibly enough happening in the spreadsheet. So these were certain challenges faced, and maintaining the consistency of the data. So when I talk upon maintaining the consistency of the data, that is making sure the data is consistent enough, that is not having any redundancy, chance of errors or lots of discrepancy into the values. But the spreadsheets were able to satisfy some of them, but was not able to satisfy few of them. So when these challenges were faced into market, they came up with an approach that why can't we invent a tool or an effective way of storing the data where all those challenges would be overcome, where all those challenges will be looked upon, and we will be able to store the data effectively and able to handle it in an efficient manner. And that's when they came up with an approach of something called as database. Now, as I said that what's a database? Database is nothing but a collection of data where a related data will be stored at one particular position. Now, with respect to this, all those challenges which was faced by spreadsheet were overcome, and the primary goal of creating the database was to store huge amount of data which spreadsheets were lagging. And with respect to the other goals taken into consideration, my database were able to tackle all the problems which my spreadsheets were facing and storing the data in an effective manner. And that's the reason why databases are very popular in the recent market. Now, why databases are helpful in order to store huge amount of data in providing security and all? If you all must be going through subscription websites such as Netflix, Amazon and everything. They also have their data stored in databases. Now what kind of data do they store in databases? You all go and see videos, you all go and see movies, you all go and see series which are there stored into their databases. So that's also a data which they have. They are stored in their backend in the form of database, and they are giving you an access of the data, which means they are providing you to view that data. The access of the data is given. But as you know that it is given with a security. Now what's the security? You have that authentication, that you have to use a user ID and password to go and view the data. Secondly, not entire data is given to you. They have given you a portion of data. They have also applied a restriction on the same. Now what's the restriction? That you cannot go and delete any data item from the database which is shared by those companies. So this makes it more relevant, that the data is being provided, the data is being given, but with lots of security concerns. So as you know, these companies are using databases to store their data, where first, huge amount of data is being stored. Secondly, they are applying security for the same. Thirdly, the data is consistent enough, which is not having lots of errors into it, and the discrepancy is being reduced. And the fourth, that if I want to get some data, if I want to search something, I can easily do it with the help of databases. So this is why databases are now popularly used in the market. Many of the companies have stored their data in databases, right from a small scale industries to a big firms. The data is standing into databases that will help them to extract the data from anywhere and everywhere into the system. So this was about databases. Now, why the databases were invented. Now let's see why to use databases and what was the purpose of using databases. So as you can see, database is an electronically stored. Now what is the meaning of electronically stored? As you can see, database is an electronic stored. Now what is the meaning of electronically stored? Now the data are not stored in a physical pen and paper format. Initially, if the data is stored in books, registers, or it's given in the form of files and folders to me, I can have an access of the data, that is for sure, but it's physically there. But the data which I am entering are into the softwares, are into the servers, or are into the backends, and those data are electronically stored. What is the meaning of electronically? It's there somewhere into my system. It's not handy to me, it's not on my hands, it's there somewhere into my system. So the meaning of data being electronically stored is this. Now it's a systematic collection of data. Now as you have seen, my data will be systematically collected. That is, if you see an example, I can open my gallery, and in my gallery I will find sections. Now what kind of sections? I can see WhatsApp images, I can see normal camera images, I can see downloaded images. So my images are systematically stored, which means my images are stored in particular bifurcation, so that if I want to go and access data, that is if I want to go and find out data, it becomes very easy for me to find it out. For an example, if you can see in your phone book also, you see that the data are particularly stored. So let's say if I want to call to a contact with A, so I can go to A as an alphabet, and I can search for the contact which is there. If I want to contact someone with alphabet P, I can go to that particular value and then I can find it out. So my data over there is systematically stored. So most of the companies uses databases to store their data. Now it contain any type of data. Now I have not been specific that my databases are only going to consider of numbers. My databases are only going to be of audios, videos, or tables. My database is a collection of data, and as we have seen earlier, the data could be in any nature. So it can store any sort of data which are there. Now including words, numbers, images, videos, files, and so on. The database primary goal is to store huge amount of data. As you know that the limitation, the basic limitation and the most important limitation which spreadsheets had were storing a humongous amount of data, which was not being possible by my spreadsheets, and not all the information was being captured over there. So in order to have the entire set of records at one place, instead of storing them in spreadsheet, I am taking help of databases where huge amount of data is being stored. So many of the big firms are using databases as their backend, where they are storing the data of the customers, of the individual, or of the companies, where they can get it easily. Now databases are used to store large number of dynamic websites on the internet today. As you know, many websites in the backend are using databases. Let's say if I go and search on Amazon that I want to buy a book, so the extraction of information from the backend database will be given, and I would be able to see all the information related to the books which are being stored. So many of the websites have dynamically used databases as their backend. Now data can be accessed, updated, managed, stored and organized very efficiently. As I said, the need was to efficiently store the data, and in order to do it, databases were able to solve this problem. So this is why databases came into consideration. Now, why to use databases? There are some points by which we can say that we should use a database for managing our data. First is, the utmost important, it stores vast number of data in an effective manner. It is incredibly simple and quick to locate data. That is, I can find data very quickly, very easily into the database without having lots of complications over there. It's simple to add new data and modify or delete the available data. That is, if I go and I want to manipulate the data, it could be done very easily. But spreadsheet needs lots of tasks to be done. If I want to update a data, if I want to delete a data, if I want to insert a new data, it was very easily done. Data can be imported into other applications easily. That is, if I want to take my data which is stored in databases and go to, let's say, Python. That's a language where I want to do analysis of my data by the database. So I can connect it to different platforms. Let's say I want to create dashboards with respect to Tableau and BI. I could have that connectivity from my database to the different softwares which are there. So that kind of connectivity is very important, where I can import my databases to different platforms and applications to make it use. Now, database is multi-access. Now this is also one of the important factor. Now multi-access, another word for it you can hear in the market is concurrency. Now what is the meaning of concurrency or multi-access? Let's say today I am working on a data and the other person also needs to work on a data at the same time. So when I am working on spreadsheets, it might not be so much possible that when I am working on the data, I could concurrently allow another person to work on my data or to get the access of the data. But databases allow us to do, where concurrency, that is multi-access, is possible. The best example is, if you can see, I am using Netflix today and I am seeing some show. I am observing some show, I am watching some show over there. Now at the same time, my friend is also watching. Now if I am watching on one account and he is watching on another account of his, if we want to see that can we both access the data at the same time, we were able to do it because we are two different accounts for them and we are able to multi-access the data. So that is the meaning of concurrency, and not only me and my friend, there will be n number of users who are using and accessing the data at the same time, and that is the meaning of what? Multi-access. So databases is multi-access, which means that more than one person can use the same data at the same time. Now the security of the data, as I said, I want my data to be more secure. It should be encrypted, it should have user ID, it should have password, it should be secured enough so that there will be no challenges faced. In order to give the data, there should be no discrepancy faced, or there should be no breach of data faced into my database. So security of data in the database is more than that of physical papers. As we know, when we store data physically, there could be chance that my paper is lost, there could be chance that the paper is torn out or it is destroyed. So my data is also gone. So when I store it in a database, I could easily access it, I can easily secure it as well, because the database provides additional security patterns for authorized access. So this was some reasons that why we will particularly use database in the market and why databases are so popular in the recent time. So I hope we are able to understand what is a database and how the databases or why the databases are useful in the market.